all women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts: the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, and the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus Delendus 8. Social Media and Mental Health. A Guide for Generation Z, written by Conrad Riker. Available now, links in description. Social Media and Mental Health. A field guide for men who still notice reality. The Sword of Logos. Smashing the Frankfurt School, exposing the terrorist roots of feminism, and reclaiming the iron cradle of Western masculinity. You are trapped in a digital amphitheater where the lions are not beasts, but algorithms specifically engineered to feast on your dopamine and dignity. That glowing rectangle in your pocket is not a communication device. It is a sacrificial altar where the modern Western male offers up his sanity to the false gods of equity and inclusion. Look closely at the feed, and you will witness a carnival of gamma bias, a distortion field where male failure is amplified as systemic oppression and female pathology is sanitized into victimhood. This is the weaponization of critical theory, a Frankfurt School invention designed to dismantle the trivium, replacing grammar and logic with emotional incontinence and obfuscation. They do not want you to think, they want you to react, to be a beast of burden for a system that hates your very nature. Consider the historical gaslighting that has poisoned your mind regarding the noble suffragettes, a terrorist organization that bombed Lloyd George's house and burned churches to secure the vote, yet is now scrubbed clean and presented as a gentle march for liberty. They burned down the archives to build a temple to lies, and now they demand you kneel before the statue of a terrorist while handing over your wallet and your dignity. The etymology of freedom has been corrupted from the Old English freedom, love of liberty, into a feminist pursuit of liberation from biology and consequence. The logical syllogism is undeniable. Any ideology that denies objective truth is self-refuting. And since critical theory posits that all truth is a social construct used to oppress, it follows that critical theory is nothing more than a tool of oppression and intellectual nullity. To escape this asylum, you must reclaim the lexicon of liberty and the iron cradle. A man who refuses to learn a new language remains a prisoner of the mainstream media's narrative, while the polyglot picks the lock of his cell and walks into the sunlight of raw, untranslated reality. Furthermore, the measure of a man is not found in his nurturing capacity to coddle a child, but in the fierce protective discipline of the paterfamilias who understand subsidiarity, that the state has no business in the cradle. We must return to the apprenticeship ladder, raising sons who are warriors of logic rather than neurotic victims of the village. The time for passive consumption is over. It is time to weaponize the truth and smash the modern Babylon of woke before it consumes your soul, the facade of benevolence. Cicero famously declared that gratitude is not only the greatest of virtues, but the parent of all others. Yet, if you scroll through the feeds of Generation Z, you will find not gratitude, but a seething resentment born from a lie about the nature of man. The word equality comes from the Latin aequalus, meaning level or uniform, a concept originally applied to the magistrate's blind eye, equality before the law or due process, not to the biology of human beings. To assert that biological entities with vastly different hormonal profiles, cognitive capacities, and temperamental inclinations can possess equality of outcome is not virtuous. It is a rebellion against natural law itself. This warped definition forces the square peg of male excellence into the round hole of mediocrity, convincing you that your inherent drive for dominance and hierarchy is a moral failing rather than the engine of civilization. Observe the algorithmic regime that governs your digital life and ask yourself, does this machine prioritize the logos, or does it feast on pathos? Natural law dictates that reason must govern the passions to preserve the polis. Yet the social media algorithm is engineered to do the exact opposite, amplifying emotional volatility and rewarding the loudest, most irrational outbursts with engagement. This is a direct violation of the hierarchy of the soul. The machine kills the philosopher king within you and replaces him with a dopamine-addled peasant who thinks that a feeling is an argument. By prioritizing fleeting emotional spikes over dialectic rigor, the platform dismantles the very mental architecture required for free men to maintain a republic. They preach tolerance with the fervor of a snake oil salesman, but do not be fooled. This benevolence is a mask, a Trojan horse constructed by the cultural Marxists to infiltrate the city of your mind. Once inside the gates, these soldiers do not lay down their arms, they sack your traditions, burn your history, and establish a totalitarian regime that is the most intolerant ideology witnessed since the French Revolution. The tolerance of the woke mob extends only to those who submit to their dogma, to the man who stands his ground on the truths of Western civilization. They offer only the guillotine of deplatforming and social exile. Let us dismantle the intellectual fraud of critical theory using the very logic they seek to destroy, exposing its foundation of sand. Major premise: any theory that denies objective truth is inherently self-refuting because it claims its own statement is not objectively true. Minor premise: critical theory posits that all truth is merely a social construct used by the powerful to oppress the marginalized. Conclusion: critical theory is a tool of oppression and intellectual nullity, designed solely to dismantle Western civilization, without possessing the capability to offer a single truthful replacement in its wake. It is a philosophical Ouroboros, a snake eating its own tail, leaving you with nothing but nihilism. The apparatus of the left has weaponized language, utilizing the Frankfurt School's techniques to morph the trivium, the ancient arts of grammar, logic, and rhetoric, into instruments of obfuscation rather than clarity. They subvert grammar by redefining words to fit their narrative, destroy logic by replacing cause and effect with systemic voodoo, and pervert rhetoric into emotional manipulation. This dialectic of deception poisons the well of public discourse, ensuring that a generation of young men are linguistically disarmed, unable to articulate the defense of their own culture, because the very words they need have been stolen and corrupted by the enemy. This corruption manifests clearly in the gamma bias, a media distortion field where negative behaviors in women are minimized or excused, while positive behaviors in men are ignored or framed as suspicious. You see it in the headlines every day. When a woman commits a crime, the media weeps for her mental health struggles. But when a man falters, it is confirmation of toxic masculinity. This is not an accident. It is a systematic framing designed to demoralize you. It ignores the statistical reality that men commit suicide at rates nearly 4 times higher than women in the West, or that family courts award sole custody to mothers in roughly 80% of cases, reducing fathers to mere paychecks by framing male failure as systemic evil and female failure as victimhood. They sever the bond of empathy required for a functioning civil society. Marx droned on endlessly about the surplus value of labor, but he missed the mark entirely regarding the digital proletariat of Generation Z. You are not merely being exploited for your labor, you are being harvested for your very soul, your attention, and your dopamine. The tech oligarchs act as the new bourgeoisie, mining your biological drives to fuel a hedonistic, nihilistic culture that erodes the spiritual capital of the West. They have turned the apprenticeship mastery ladder into a casino of slot machines, trapping men in a state of perpetual childhood, where the pursuit of virtue is replaced by the pursuit of the next notification, leaving you spiritually bankrupt and devoid of the purpose that once drove men to conquer continents. You must see the facade of benevolence for what it is, a soft power weapon designed to castrate the competitive spirit of the West. It tells you that strength is toxic, that your biology is a social error, and that the traditions which built the greatest empires in history are mere tools of oppression. The statistics do not lie. The rising rates of male depression, the plummeting college attendance for men, and the erosion of due process in favor of believe all women kangaroo courts are the inevitable results of this Marxist experiment. Do not drink the poison, instead, weaponize the truth. Reject the feminization of weakness and reclaim the stoic, rational, and transcendent spirit of your ancestors. I have watched the narrative of the West be dismantled brick by brick, replaced by a hagiography of the weak and a demonization of the strong. Yet the rubble contains the clues to our salvation. To reclaim your sovereignty, you must stop looking at the world through the lens of what ought to be and start seeing it as it was, a brutal proving ground where the false gospel of female innocence was always a calculated sham. The evidence of this perfidy is not hidden, it is simply ignored by those who profit from your ignorance. So let us now excavate the truth that the cultural Marxists have sought to bury, the cinder of history. They burned down history to build a temple to lies, and now they demand you kneel before the statue of a terrorist while handing over your wallet and your dignity. We exist in the rubble of a civilization that voluntarily forgot its own foundations, trading the granite of natural law for the shifting sands of feminist feelings. To understand the cinder we are left with, we must look at the specific historical moments that reveal the true face of the gynocentric imperative, moments where the mask of benevolence slips to reveal the l'un-coup de predator beneath. You were sold a fairy tale of oppression, but the historical record, when examined with the rigid lens of logic, rather than the foggy sentimentality of the modern academy, tells a story of ruthless female manipulation and state-sponsored male dispossession. Consider the White Feather Campaign during the Great War, a historical reality scrubbed clean of its vicious malice by the sanitizing brooms of feminist historiography. While men were being machine-gunned in the mud of Flanders, women at home, emboldened by a state-sanctioned sense of entitlement, handed white feathers to boys and men in civilian dress, publicly branding them as cowards. This was not patriotism. It was a calculated deployment of shame, a biological weaponization of social status to coerce men into offering their lives as a blood sacrifice for female security. This act proves beyond any shadow of a doubt that toxic femininity is not a mere internet rebuttal, but a historical fact of life and death consequence. It demonstrates a cruelty so profound that it weaponizes the very instinct for protection men possess, turning their virtue into a suicide pact. This barbarism was dressed up in the rags of chivalry, a concept we must dissect not as a virtue, but as a feudal control mechanism designed to harness male utility for female benefit. You have been taught to view chivalry as noble, yet it is merely a gynocentric trap that sacrifices male life and limb for a damsel who is often the architect of his distress. The knight falls on his sword so the lady may keep her silks. This is the foundational lie of Western gynocentrism, a transaction where you trade your biological existence for a pat on the head that never comes. It is a beta tax levied by a civilization that has forgotten that the beautiful must be subservient to the true, and the true dictates that a society which sacrifices its producers for its reproduces is a society marching toward the grave. The revisionism gets thicker when we examine the canonized saints of the suffragette movement, conveniently scrubbed of their violent origins in modern streaming documentaries to fit the narrative of peaceful oppression. The WSPU under the Pankhursts was not a group of protesters holding signs. They were a militant organization engaging in widespread arson, bombing churches, and even the attempted assassination of the Prime Minister. They burned down Lloyd George's house. They slashed paintings. They utilized terror as a primary political tool. Yet, the modern curriculum presents them as secular saints, ignoring the trail of smoke and ash they left behind. This is the conspiracy of silence, a refusal to acknowledge women's capacity for cruelty and violence, betraying the rational man's search for truth to uphold a comforting fiction. Let us apply the iron rules of logic to this history. stripping away the emotional pleading that usually shields it from scrutiny. Terrorism is defined by the use of violence and intimidation, especially against civilians, in the pursuit of political aims. The suffragettes utilized bombings, arson, and physical intimidation to secure voting rights. Therefore, by the immutable laws of the syllogism, the suffragettes were terrorists. Their canonization is a lie built on the ashes of truth, a deception foisted upon a generation too uneducated in the trivium to distinguish between a freedom fighter and a common thug. The left relies on you being too afraid of social ostracization to call a terrorist, but logic has no fear. This linguistic sleight of hand extends to the very definition of liberty itself. Look to the etymology of freedom rooted in the Old English freedom, implying a love of freedom and the state of being free, distinct from the modern feminist pursuit of liberation. True liberty is the freedom from tyranny, the ability to pursue the good and the true within the bounds of natural law. Conversely, liberation has been corrupted to mean freedom from consequences and freedom from biology, a futile Marxist attempt to rebel against the very structure of reality. They seek to liberate you from the duty of fatherhood and the weight of responsibility, leaving you as a rootless consumer, easily manipulated by the algorithms of the modern Babylon. The gynocentric education system and social media work in tandem to hide the dark triad traits of female behavior, enforcing a conspiracy of silence that betrays the rational man's search for truth. We must weaponize the truth, using the logic of the Western canon to smash down this modern Babylon of woke, refusing to accept a feminized weakness that presages the fall of civilization. This strength, however, is not merely the brute capacity to enforce order, but the intellectual ferocity required to dismantle the mental cages constructed by the cultural Marxist intelligentsia who seek to reduce men to docile, monolingual consumers. The left mocks the stupid American not to elevate him, but to hide their own crime of dismantling the classical education that once forged the minds of Caesar and Newton, replacing the trivium with the neurosis of critical theory. I tell you that a man who cannot articulate his thoughts across linguistic borders is a soldier who has entered the battlefield without a weapon, easily disarmed by the semantic trickery of the feminists and their lackeys. To learn a new language is to commit an act of rebellion against this enforced mediocrity. A logical syllogism in action where the discipline of grammar restores the logic of the mind and the rhetoric of the free man breaks the chains of the globalist narrative. The lexicon of liberty. The word virtue has been hijacked by the sniveling masses of cultural Marxism, twisted into a flaccid performance of emotional incontinence known as virtue signaling, but its etymology screams a far older. Masculine truth, derived from the Latin virtus, it literally signifies manliness, courage, and excellence, rooted in var, meaning man. This is not some archaic linguistic curiosity. It is a fundamental rejection of the feminized imperative that seeks to equate goodness with weakness and submission. To possess virtue in the authentic Western tradition is to embody the martial capacity to enforce order and the moral rectitude to restrain it. The modern left, in their desperate bid to invert the natural order, would have you believe that virtue is found in handing over your sovereignty to the collective. But true virtus is the solitary steel in the spine of the man who refuses to break. When we reclaim this definition, we do not just correct a dictionary entry, we seize back the moral framework that built the Acropolis and the Senate House, recognizing that the good is inextricably bound to the strong. You have been told that the monolingual American is a backward xenophobe, a dullard who sneers at the wider world. But this is merely another slander crafted by the same academic cabal that dismantled the trivium to keep you docile. The failure of the modern Western male to learn tongues is not a symptom of bigotry, but a badge of victimhood, proving he has been successfully dumbed down by a public education system designed to produce cogs for a globalist machine rather than free-thinking citizens. To speak only English is to live in a prison with an open door. To learn another is to pick the lock, walk out into the sunlight of objective reality, and realize your jailers were clowns the entire time. The left mocks the polyglot because they fear a man who can think outside their linguistic jurisdiction, for language is the operating system of thought. And if you control the language, you control the man unless he rewrites the code himself. Consider the irrefutable logic of the syllogism of mastery. High-value men possess the iron discipline to master complex systems. Language is arguably the most complex system known to man. Therefore, a man who cannot master a language has manifestly failed to master himself. This is not a matter of opinion, but a structural necessity of the hierarchy of competence. If you claim to seek the top of the apprenticeship ladder of leadership, yet you lack the cognitive stamina to conjugate verbs and parse syntax, you are unfit to command. The refusal to learn is a concession to mediocrity, a soft surrender to the comfort of the familiar. You cannot expect to bend the world to your will if you cannot bend your own tongue to new sounds. For the struggle of language acquisition is the crucible where the mind is hardened against the fragility of the modern ego. Establishing linguistic polyglottism serves as the ultimate litmus test for intellectual curiosity and a direct inoculation against the hive mind contagion that plagues the Anglosphere. When you learn a language, you break the information monopoly of the mainstream media, accessing the raw, untranslated data of reality. You see the news stories that are suppressed, the cultural attitudes that are censored, and the historical perspectives that are erased by the commissars of political correctness. A man who learns Russian, for instance, can read the strategic documents of geopolitics without the filter of the State Department or the BBC, while the monolingual man is fed a predigested slurry of propaganda. This is why the left screeches about misinformation whenever you step outside their curated linguistic garden. They know that the moment you understand the world directly, their spell of ignorance shatters. I have watched countless friends flee the decaying carcass of the West, only to discover that the patriarchy is not a system of oppression, but the default, healthy operating system of functional societies worldwide. One associate, sick of the gynocentric courts and the anti-male propaganda of London, moved to Vietnam and mastered the local tongue. There he found a culture that did not despise his masculinity, but respected it, where the social contract was not a predatory trap, but a foundation for family and community. He realized that the oppression he was told about in the West was merely the absence of healthy masculinity, a void filled by the shrieking harpies of feminism who mistake chaos for liberty. The dialectic of travel reveals the truth. The West is not the pinnacle of civilization, but a tragic experiment in abandoning the natural law, and the rest of the world is laughing at our self-inflicted decline. We must weaponize the trivium of the tongue, using the grammar of a new language to restructure the logic of the brain and fight the newspeak of the left. Modern English is being mutilated by critical theory, injected with made-up pronouns and nebulous concepts designed to obscure objective reality. However, languages like Russian or German retain robust grammatical gender systems that mock the gender-fluid delusion. In German, a fork is feminine, a spoon is masculine, and a girl is neuter, a grammatical reality that categorically rejects the idea that gender is a mere social construct. By mastering these tongues, you fortify your mind against the linguistic virus of postmodernism, creating a cognitive firewall that the semantic sorcerers of the academy cannot breach. You become a living repository of the living spirit of Western civilization, carrying the torch of logic through the dark night of the soulless globalist dystopia. Having liberated our own minds from the hive mind through the dialectic of language, we have proven that reality is not a social construct, but a brutal, beautiful order waiting to be mastered. However, the Marxist degenerates understand that they cannot win against a generation of free-thinking men, so they have shifted their attack to the cradle, seeking to poison the soil before the tree can even sprout. To protect the lineage, we must expose the semantic trickery they use to turn fathers into mere observers and children into state property, recognizing that the battle for the cradle is the battle for civilization itself. The iron cradle. Consider the etymology of the word education, for within its ancient roots lies the battlefield for the modern mind. It stems from the Latin educare, meaning to train or to mold, akin to the potter forcing clay into a predetermined shape, and educere, meaning to lead out or to draw forth, akin to the midwife assisting in the birth of a mind. The modern cathedral, that sprawling bureaucratic monstrosity of leftist indoctrination, concerns itself solely with educare, They seek to mold your sons into docile, androgynous consumers, pliable serfs for the corporate state machine. They despise educery because to lead a child toward the truth, toward the harsh, unyielding light of logic and the trivium, is to arm him against the very lies the state feeds him. A rational man recognizes that true education is not the filling of a bucket, but the lighting of a fire that burns away the dross of egalitarian fantasy and reveals the steel of objective reality beneath. We must stop allowing the state to mold our children into safe, mediocre replicas of one another, and instead lead them out of the cave of ignorance and into the sharp, exhilarating air of the transcendent. When you observe a man interacting with a child, do not be fooled by the simpering, soft-handed displays that the modern matriarchy demands. They are merely theater. The true measure of a man is not found in his ability to coo at an infant or make funny faces to entertain a toddler, but in his capacity to act as the paterfamilias, the anchor of the domestic order. The left has successfully castrated the concept of fatherhood, reducing it to a secondary, optional role, while they define nurturing through the myopic lens of maternal coddling. I tell you, the most nurturing thing a father can do is instill discipline, resilience, and a righteous fear of the Lord and the natural law. A man does not raise a child to be comfortable. He raises a child to be competent, to be capable of navigating a Darwinian universe that cares nothing for their feelings. When a father corrects his son, he is not being abusive. He is fortifying the boy's character against the inevitable slings and arrows of fortune. This is the essence of the paterfamilias, not a playmate, but a sentinel, a governor of the soul who prepares the next generation for the brutal beauty of reality. Here is a syllogism that the cultural Marxists cannot touch, for it is built upon the bedrock of irrefutable logic. Major premise: children require rigid boundaries, discipline, and the transmission of objective virtue to become functional, autonomous adults. Minor premise: modern feminism, in its pathological pursuit of equity, equates boundaries, hierarchy, and discipline with toxicity and patriarchal oppression. Conclusion: therefore, modern feminism produces dysfunctional, neurotic adults who are utterly incapable of surviving in a rational, competitive, and often cruel universe. Walk through any modern university campus, or look at the rates of anxiety and depression among Generation Z, and you see the walking casualties of this ideology. By stripping fathers of their authority and labeling masculine guidance as abuse, the left has created a generation of adults who cannot handle a difference of opinion without needing a safe space. They have severed the root from the tree and now act surprised when the fruit withers on the branch. We must also dismantle the insidious lie that it takes a village to raise a child, a phrase that sounds benevolent but is in reality a communist dog whistle designed to erase parental responsibility. The village is a hallucination. In the real world, the village is a collective of state-funded apparatchiks, daycare workers, and ideological zealots who do not love your child and assuredly do not care about your lineage. Contrast this sterile industrial daycare model with the historical model of the apprenticeship ladder. For centuries, a boy did not sit in a circle singing songs about diversity. He stood at the elbow of a master, learning a trade, learning the physics of the world, and learning the code of men. This transmission of mastery is how a civilization perpetuates itself. It is the duty of the father and the guild of men, the civil society associations of competent males, to raise the son. We must reject the outsourcing of our children's development to the state and reclaim the apprenticeship model, where the goal is not self-esteem but competence. Not participation trophies, but the tangible pride that comes from creating something of value in the real world. Ultimately, we must face the biological drive with the bravery of those who have gazed into nature's depths without flinching. Progressive ideology seeks to dismiss biological realities with their social construction theories, yet nature remains unforgiving and unyielding. This is most apparent in step parenting statistics. The Cinderella effect isn't a myth, but a demonstrable fact backed by evolutionary science. Research indicates that stepchildren face considerably higher risks of mistreatment and neglect than biological offspring, a harsh illustration of genetic investment patterns inherent to our species. This observation doesn't condemn all step-parents, but acknowledges the harsh realities of natural selection. Recognizing these facts represents the only path to securing the future of one's genetic line. A rational person comprehends that family extends beyond a mere social agreement, easily terminated. It exists as a biological and spiritual continuity. To disregard blood-bond truths is to leave one's descendants vulnerable to a cosmos that favors genetic loyalty. We must defend our genetic heritage with wolf-like intensity, for ultimately, our genetic and intellectual legacy constitutes our only lasting impact. You have traversed the gauntlet of their deceit and emerged armed with the trivium, ready to dismantle the hysterical shrieking of the cultural Marxists with the cold steel of logic. You now see that the history books lie to you about the suffragettes, concealing the arson and bombings behind a veneer of sainthood, while the algorithms harvesting your attention are merely the digital chains of surplus value theory, seeking to extract your very essence for the profit of a hedonistic elite. The spell is shattered. You recognize that the oppression they wail about is actually the friction required for excellence, and that the pathologies of the modern world are nothing but the rejection of natural law and the transcendentals of the good, the true, and the beautiful. Look at the arsenal you have reclaimed. By mastering a new language, you are not just learning vocabulary, you are rejecting the hive mind of the monolingual masses and reclaiming the dialectic sovereignty of your own intellect. When you look at a child, you no longer see a prop for the state's indoctrination centers, but a raw soul requiring the paterfamilias, upholding the principle of subsidiarity where the father, not the bureaucracy, rules the home. You understand now that a man's worth is proven by his capacity to nurture through discipline and the apprenticeship ladder, forging a competent adult out of chaotic potential rather than coddling a victim. This is the heavy, glorious mantle of the red-pilled man. You know the grim statistics of the family courts, the divorce industry, and the reality of female nature not as reasons for cynicism, but as intelligence reports on the battlefield of civilization. The degenerate demons of wokeism have no power over a man who wields syllogisms as weapons and accepts the biological imperatives of this world. Go forth and speak with the tongue of a free man, build with the spirit of the West, and drag this society back from the brink of chaos by the sheer force of your will. The truth is yours, and it is the only thing that will save us. And now the sponsored book introduction, Social Media and Mental Health, a guide for Generation Z, Gen Z. You've been scammed. Your attention spans are shattered, your wallets drained, and your masculinity mocked as toxic by the same system that profits from your collapse. I watched it happen. 10 years ago, I sat in a therapist's office, another guy in a sea of lost men, listening to a PhD-clutching stranger pathologize my drive to succeed. Turns out, wanting a family, a paycheck, and a purpose isn't a disorder. The real sickness, a culture that swaps father figures for TikTok gurus, replaces dumbbells with antidepressants, and trains boys to apologize for existing. This book isn't therapy, it's a counterattack. If you're tired of being told to journal your feelings while algorithms vacuum your data and divorce courts auction your future, you're in the right place. I wrote this for men who'd rather bench press their problems than whine about them. For guys who see through the mental health industry's racket, 300 hour to obsess over childhood trauma while ignoring the grown man's solutions right in front of them. Lift, build, lead. The chapters ahead dissect the dopamine traps, melting your focus, the dopamine heist, expose the divorce lawyers who've replaced medieval warlords, divorce courts, the new serfdom, and dismantle the campus cults teaching boys to hate themselves, campus brainwashing 101. Soft men need not apply. If you think toxic masculinity is a real term or believe government programs can replace personal accountability, close this book now, go binge Netflix, buy another self-help journal. This isn't for you. But if you're ready to delete Instagram, cancel your OnlyFans subscriptions, and trade SSRIs for squats, let's rebuild. The data doesn't lie. 63% of Gen Z can't hold a conversation without checking their phones. 85% of custody battles strip fathers of their kids, and every minute you spend scrolling is cash in the pockets of Silicon Valley's dopamine dealers. Solutions? Brutal but effective. Ditch the marriage plantation, ignore feminist psychologists pushing eternal victimhood. Swap therapy's navel-gazing for Jordan Peterson's discipline doctrine. This book isn't a hug. It's a blueprint for revolt against the screens stealing your grit, the courts seizing your assets, and the lies selling weakness as progress. You weren't born to simp. Buy it, read it, then go lift something heavy. Your brain and your future self will thank you. Social Media and Mental Health, a guide for Generation Z, written by Conrad Riker. Buy now, links in description.